right, listeners, let's dive right in. We're all about Japanese today, specifically that JLPT N5 exam.
The one everyone's got to tackle, right?
Right. And luckily, our listeners provided this awesome guide, a complete guide to learning Japanese for JLPT N5. So we're going to extract all the juicy bits.
The cheat sheet, basically.
Exactly. Think of us as your study buddies, pointing out the best techniques and strategies to help you crush this exam. It's like the first level, on your way to Japanese fluency.
Exactly. Got to get those foundations solid. And the cool thing about the N5 is it focuses on those core building blocks. Vocabulary, kanji, grammar, reading, and listening. It's all multiple choice, thankfully.
Thank goodness for that. No stage fright yet.
Not yet.
But here's the thing I found interesting. The guide, it really pushes speaking and writing practice. Even though they're not directly tested at this level, it even suggests a whole day dedicated to those skills. What do you think? Why is that?
Well, think of it this way. Imagine learning piano, but only reading sheet music. Never actually, playing the keys.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Language is similar. You got to use it. Even at the beginner stage, it deepens your understanding. Makes all those grammar rules and vocab words come alive.
Okay, you've convinced me. So let's break down this study plan the guide lays out. It's pretty structured, right? Each day has a focus. Mondays are for kanji and vocab, Tuesdays grammar, Wednesdays reading, Thursdays listening, and Fridays, well, you guessed it, speaking and writing. Then Saturdays are for mock tests, and Sundays are for chillin' and reviewing. What are your thoughts on that kind of approach?
It's a really solid framework, especially for beginners who need that structure. The daily focus keeps you moving, prevents that feeling of being overwhelmed. And they give you flexibility, too. 3 to 6 months to work with. Recognizes that everyone learns at their own pace.
Yeah, for sure. We're not robots. And I love that Sunday chill-out session. Lets everything sink in. But let's be real, the Japanese writing system, it can be pretty intimidating at first. 3 different scripts. Hiragana, Katakana, and then those infamous kanji. Phew. How does the guide suggest we tackle this triple threat?
Strategically. It breaks it down so it's way less scary than it seems. Remember, N5 only needs about 100 to 120 kanji. Totally doable with the right approach.
Okay, 100 and something kanji. That makes me feel a lot better. But what are these right approaches we're talking about? Spill the beans.
All right, so for hiragana and katakana, those are phonetic, so the guide suggests chunking similar characters together. Practice writing them, over and over. And mnemonics, memory aids are your best friend here. There are even apps like Dr. Moku makes it kind of fun, like a game.
Ooh, gamified learning. I'm into that. Anything to make studying more enjoyable. But those kanji, those seem way more complex. How do we even begin?
They are tricky, but the guide has some great strategies. Mnemonics are still key, like, for example, the kanji for tree. Kind of looks like a tree,
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Simple, but effective. They also recommend writing practice every day, flashcards, and grouping kanji by themes or radicals. The building blocks.
So breaking it down into smaller chunks and making those abstract symbols mean something, right? But mnemonics, they only work if they stick, right?
100%. I still remember the one I used for fire.
Yeah.
I pictured 2 pieces of wood rubbing together, making a spark. The 2 strokes of the kanji are those pieces of wood. Visual story, hard to forget.
You're right, it works. The more senses you involve, the better, I guess. Sight, sound, even touch when you write. It all helps those connections, right? But let's move on to vocab, because that can feel like a bottomless pit. So many words.
True, but for N5, you only need to focus on 800 to 1,000 of the most common words, the ones you'll actually use every day.
Okay, 800 to 1,000, that's manageable. Still a lot, but way better than the whole dictionary. But how do we actually learn these words and make them stick?
The guide recommends a multi-pronged approach. Flashcards are classic. Grouping words by category, making simple sentences with new words, that all helps. And don't underestimate saying the words out loud. It makes a difference, trust me.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. It's like you're giving those words life, and it helps with pronunciation, intonation, all those things you need to actually speak Japanese, right?
You got it. Like building a muscle. Use it or lose it.
All right, so time for the big, scary one, grammar. This is where a lot of language learners get nervous. But the guide says N5 grammar, start simple, baby steps, right? What are some of those essential patterns we should be focusing on?
One of the most basic, and it pops up everywhere, is A wa B desu. A is B. Watashi wa gakusei desu means I am a student.
Okay, I'm following.
Then there's A wa bi janai desu for A is not B. And A ni B ga arimasu, that's for there is B on A, Master those, and you'll be making sentences like a pro in no time.
Those are definitely the building blocks. And the guide really emphasizes, not just understanding them, but actually using them. Writing sentences, finding a language partner, even talking to yourself in Japanese. Anything to really solidify those concepts.
It's like learning a dance. You can watch someone do it a million times, but until you do it, you won't truly get it. You'll mess up at first, for sure, but that's part of the process.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. It's like when I tried making sushi for the first time, more like a rice explosion than those neat little rolls.
We've all been there.
But hey, at least I tried. And honestly, those mess-ups teach you more than just following instructions perfectly, right?
You learn from the mistakes. It's how we figure out what works for us. And speaking of figuring things out, the guide has some really cool ideas for listening and speaking skills, how to make those your own. Because ultimately, you want to use this language in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all ears. No pun intended.
Well, for listening, it's all about starting slow. Ease those ears in. NHK Easy Japanese podcasts are perfect for that. Super simplified language, slower pace, great for training your ears to actually pick out those Japanese sounds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Start with the basics. But what about something, a bit more fun? Besides educational podcasts, of course.
Well, the guide suggests anime or Japanese dramas, with Japanese subtitles, of course.
Yeah.
Fun way to immerse yourself in the language and culture. You pick up vocab, get a feel for how people actually talk.
Oh, I love that. Learning while being entertained. Two birds, one stone. But let's say you want to really get into that test-taking mindset, specifically for the N5 listening section. What then?
Then it's time for practice tests. Specifically for N5, they simulate the exam environment, time pressure and all that. Get you used to the format. And here's a pro tip. Try shadowing.
Shadowing. What's that? Some secret ninja technique?
Not quite. It's where you listen to a native speaker and repeat what they say. Like right after them. Try to mimic their pronunciation, intonation, everything.
Oh, so like vocal mimicry. That sounds kind of fun, actually. And I bet it really helps with pronunciation. Plus, you're training your ear to hear those subtle differences in spoken Japanese.
Exactly. Rhythm and fluency, too. But listening is only half the battle, right? To really speak Japanese, you gotta, speak.
You're telling me. Nothing like actually putting those skills to use, but I know for a lot of beginners, speaking can be scary. What does the guide recommend for, overcoming that fear and finding opportunities to practice?
Language exchange apps are a good one. Or conversation groups, online or in person. You connect with native Japanese speakers who are learning your language. Win-win, right? You both get to practice and learn about each other's cultures.
Oh, that's awesome. Like a language buddy system. It reminds me of when I was learning Spanish, I made this hilarious mistake once. I wanted to say I'm embarrassed, but what came out was I'm pregnant. Oof. Made for a memorable conversation, that's for sure.
We all have those moments. It's all part of the process, right? You gotta laugh at yourself sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Makes for great stories later on. Speaking of stories, let's talk reading and writing. Even at N5, the guide makes a big deal about these skills.
And for good reason. Reading exposes you to new words, reinforces that grammar you've been learning, gives you a peek into Japanese culture and how people think. The guide recommends starting with simple news articles. NHK Easy News is good for that. Nice and clear language.
A good stepping stone to more authentic Japanese, right? What about those of us itching to get into manga?
For manga, they recommend starting with, believe it or not, children's manga. Simpler language, fun storylines. As you get better, you can move on to the more complex stuff.
It's like leveling up. Makes sense. But what about writing? Starting out, that can seem pretty daunting with all those different scripts.
Yeah, but the guide has some cool tips, like they encourage keeping a diary in Japanese. Doesn't have to be long, even just a few sentences a day. Helps solidify that vocab and grammar.
Ooh, I like that. Kind of like a personal writing practice.
Exactly. They also suggest this website called Lang8. You post your writing, and native speakers can give you feedback.
Oh, wow. Like having a Japanese tutor in your pocket. And for the social media fans out there, they even suggest writing short posts or comments in Japanese.
Exactly. Little things here and there all add up. It's all about finding ways to incorporate it into your life. And remember, consistency is key, not perfection. 5 minutes a day is better than nothing, right?
Building those habits bit by bit. Now let's talk about the big day, the JLPT N5 exam. Time to put all this hard work to the test.
And the guide really emphasizes mock tests. Throughout your prep, not just at the end, they help you gauge progress, get familiar with the format, time yourself, all those test-taking
It's
strategies.
like a dress rehearsal for the big show. But what about those exam day nerves? Any tips for staying cool under pressure?
Absolutely.
No.
First off, pacing. Don't get bogged down on one question. Skip it. Come back later if you have time.
Don't let one question derail you.
Exactly. Prioritize those easier questions. Get the momentum going.
Like a warm-up before the real workout.
Exactly. And most importantly, breathe. Stay hydrated. Trust yourself. You've put in the work.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But even with all the prep in the world, learning Japanese or any language, it's a journey, not just about passing a test.
Totally agree. The guide really emphasizes that. It's ongoing, full of ups and downs, surprises along the way.
And those surprises are often the best part. But let's shift gears a bit. What comes after the N5? What's the next level up on this Japanese adventure?
Well, naturally, it's the JLPT N4. Builds on everything you learned at N5, but it gets a bit more challenging. More grammar, bigger vocabulary, tougher reading and listening.
Leveling up. I like it. But before we go full on N4, let's take stock of what we've covered so far in this deep dive.
We've gone through the N5 exam, section by section, all the key things you need to know.
And we've really dug into the guide's advice for the writing system, building vocab, tackling those tricky grammar points.
Shared some stories along the way, some tips to make it fun. Because learning a language shouldn't be a chore, right?
Absolutely not. And we've also encouraged you to go beyond just the guide itself. Explore authentic materials, connect with other learners, really immerse yourself in the culture.
But with all this info swirling around, I think it's important to ask, what kind of learner are you? What works best for you?
Ooh, good point. It's so easy to get caught up in, following one specific path, but the best learning happens when you tailor it to yourself.
Exactly. Some people love structured plans, flashcards. Others learn best by doing, through music, movies, conversations.
The key is to try different things. See what sparks your interest, makes you want to keep going.
Embrace that inner learner. Find your style. And remember, learning a new language, it's an adventure.
I love that, an adventure. But before we say sayara for today, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Hit me with it.
We've talked about all these amazing resources and techniques, but the most important thing is your motivation. Why are you doing this?
Your why. That's what keeps you going, especially when it gets tough.
So ask yourself, why am I learning Japanese?
Is it to connect with family, travel to Japan, boost your career? Or maybe just to challenge yourself, to see what you're capable of?
Whatever it is, hold on to it. Let it guide you. This language learning journey, it's going to be amazing. And remember, we're here to support you every step of the way.
Until next time, happy learning.
It's more than just like memorizing flashcards and grammar rules.
Yeah, it's about opening a whole new window to the world,
Exactly. Connecting with people from different cultures, broadening those horizons.
Pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Embrace that lifelong learning thing.
I love that. And speaking of new experiences, I gotta confess something.
Oh, what's that?
Well, all this talk about Japan has got me craving some Japanese food,
Makes sense. Japanese food is amazing. The flavors, fresh ingredients, the presentation. It's like art.
It's a whole experience. Speaking of, have you ever had ramen?
Ramen, of course. It's a classic. Noodle soup dish. So many different kinds. You have to try it.
Okay, ramen is officially on my list.
Good choice. And hey, while we're at it, why not explore other parts of Japanese culture too?
Like what? Give me some ideas.
Well, have you ever looked into traditional Japanese arts? Calligraphy, tea ceremony, flower arranging, they're all so unique, really give you a sense of Japanese aesthetics and philosophy.
I've always admired how elegant Japanese art is. That precision.
And don't forget about Japanese literature. Haiku, novels, so many stories to discover.
So much to explore. It's amazing how learning a language can open up a whole new world of, everything.
It really is a gift, it just keeps giving.
Well said. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah, sounds good. We've covered a lot today. Hopefully our listeners are feeling, inspired to start their own Japanese journey.
I'm sure they are. But before we say sayonara, one final thought.
Go ahead.
Learning a new language, it's truly transformative.
Challenges you, makes you think in new ways, opens up so many possibilities.
Takes dedication, patience, and, a willingness to jump in.
Yeah.
Even when you're not sure what's going to happen.
But the rewards, they're incredible.
So to all our listeners out there, go for it. Embrace the beauty of the Japanese language. See where it takes you.
And remember, we're here to cheer you on every step of the way.
Happy learning, everyone.
Sayonara.